"You're freezing. Come home with me." The cowboy told the homeless native woman in the cold. The cold came early that night, sharper than usual, the kind that sinks into the bones and refuses to leave. The small town looked quiet on the surface, but the wind told a different story. It whistled through empty streets, slipped between closed shops, and pushed bits of snow along the sidewalks. Most people had already gone home. Lights glowed behind windows. Doors were locked. Heaters were on. Inside those houses, families sat safely, unaware of how dangerous the night was becoming for anyone left outside. The cowboy finished his work later than usual. The day had been long, filled with hard labor, frozen ground, and tired muscles. His hands ached as he climbed into his truck, breathing out slowly as warm air filled the cab. He sat there for a moment, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. Winter always reminded him how alone ranch life could be. Miles of land, long hours, and silence that followed him everywhere. He started the engine and drove toward town, planning only to grab a few supplies before heading home. The road was nearly empty. Streetlights cast pale yellow circles on the snow-covered pavement. As he slowed near the old business district, something caught his eye. Near a closed storefront, tucked into the shadows, someone was sitting on the ground. At first, he thought it was a pile of old clothes or trash pushed against the wall. Then the figure moved. He eased his foot off the gas and pulled over. The truck idled quietly as he looked again. A woman sat there, her back against the brick wall, knees pulled close to her chest. She wore layers, but they were thin and worn. A blanket, frayed and dirty, was wrapped around her shoulders. Her head was bowed, long dark hair falling forward, swaying slightly as the wind passed. Something tightened in his chest. People had likely walked past her all day. Some probably noticed. Most probably did not. Even if they did, they kept moving. It was easier that way, easier not to see, easier not to feel responsible. The cowboy stayed in his truck for a moment, watching. He told himself the same things others did. Maybe she had somewhere to go. Maybe someone else would help. Maybe it wasn't his place. Then the wind gusted harder. The woman's shoulders shook. Her hands came out from under the blanket, rubbing together, stiff and slow, like they didn't quite belong to her anymore. Her breath came out in short, shallow clouds. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable now. It was dangerous. He opened the truck door. The sound seemed loud in the quiet street. The woman's head lifted instantly. Her body tensed, ready. He could see it even from a distance. Years of surviving outside had taught her to stay alert. Trust was not something freely given. He stopped a few steps away, making sure to keep his hands visible. The last thing he wanted was to scare her. "Hey," he said gently, "I don't mean to bother you." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes studied him, sharp despite the exhaustion written across her face. She was native, her features strong, her expression guarded. Even in the dim light, he could see pride there, buried under layers of hardship. "I'm fine," she said finally, though her voice trembled. He nodded as if he believed her, though everything about her said otherwise. Her lips were pale. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her shoes were soaked, the edges cracked and splitting. No one sitting outside on a night like this was fine. "It's getting really cold," he said. "Colder than it looks." She gave a small shrug. "I've been colder." That answer stayed with him, not because it was brave, but because it was tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of pushing through things no one should have to endure. He glanced back at his truck. "I've got some coffee, it's hot." Her eyes flicked toward the thermos he held, then back to his face. Suspicion passed through her expression, quick and practiced. Kind offers often came with conditions. She had learned that lesson the hard way. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. "Just thought it might help." After a long pause, she nodded once. He poured the coffee into a cup and handed it to her, careful not to step too close. Her hands shook as she took it. She wrapped her fingers around the cup and held it near her chest, letting the warmth soak in. For a moment her eyes closed. He watched her breathe out slowly as if some small part of the tension left her body. "Thank you," she said quietly. They sat in silence for a bit. Snow continued to fall, settling on the sidewalk, on the edges of her blanket, on the brim of his hat. The world felt paused, like it was holding its breath. "You got somewhere warm you can go tonight?" he asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. "Not really," she said. "Shelter's full, it usually is." He clenched his jaw. He had heard that story before. Too many people, not enough space. Too many rules, too many reasons to turn someone away. She stared into the cup. "I'll be okay, I just need to get through the night." He looked at her again, really looked. The way her body leaned slightly to one side, trying to protect itself from the wind. The way she moved slowly, like every motion cost her something. Getting through the night didn't mean sleeping. It meant surviving hour by hour, hoping the cold didn't win. He thought about his ranch. The spare room near the barn, the heater that ran all night, the silence, the emptiness. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from knowing what the right thing was and how complicated it could become. "You're freezing," he said, his voice low but firm. "Come home with me." The words hung between them. Her head snapped up. Shock crossed her face, followed quickly by something else. Fear, doubt, maybe even anger. "I don't do that," she said, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "I'm not asking you to," he replied calmly. "I'm just offering you a warm place to sleep, nothing more." She studied him again, longer this time. The silence stretched. Cars passed far away, their headlights briefly lighting the street before disappearing. "You don't even know me," she said. He nodded. "That's true," she shook her head. "People don't help for no reason." He thought about how to answer that. The truth was simple, but simple truths were often the hardest to explain. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "people just don't want someone to freeze." Her eyes softened just a little, then hardened again. Life had taught her to question moments like this, to protect herself, to expect disappointment. "I'll think about it," she said. He respected that. He didn't push. He stood there with her, letting her finish the coffee, letting the warmth last a little longer. As the minutes passed, the wind grew stronger. The cold grew deeper. Even with the coffee, her shivering returned. Finally, she spoke again. "If I say yes," she said, "I leave if I want, no questions." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "And you keep your distance." "I will." She took a deep breath, as if stepping over an invisible line. "Okay." He opened the truck door and turned up the heat before she climbed in. She moved stiffly, carefully, like she expected the warmth to disappear at any second. He handed her a clean blanket from behind the seat. She hesitated, then took it. As the truck pulled away, the empty street faded behind them. The old storefront disappeared into the falling snow. Neither of them spoke, but both of them felt it. This night was different. And nothing would be the same after it. The truck moved slowly through the quiet streets, tires crunching over thin snow. Inside, warm air filled the space, fogging the windows just enough to soften the world outside. The woman sat stiffly in the passenger seat, hands folded tightly in her lap under the blanket. She stared straight ahead, eyes alert, as if memorizing every turn, every streetlight, every sound. The cowboy kept both hands on the steering wheel. He didn't look at her too often, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. The radio stayed off. Silence felt safer. For her, the warmth was almost overwhelming. It had been so long since she felt heat that didn't fade away after a few minutes. Her fingers slowly loosened, color returning to them bit by bit. Still, she stayed tense. Warmth could disappear. Kindness could change. She had learned that lesson many times. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice calm and low. "You can tell me if you want me to stop anywhere, or if you change your mind." She nodded slightly but didn't answer. The road out of town stretched wide and empty. Fields lay covered in white, fences half buried by snow. The woman finally turned her head, watching the open land pass by. It reminded her of places she once knew, places where her grandparents told stories by the fire, places that felt far away now, almost like dreams. "How far is it?" she asked quietly. "About 20 minutes," he replied. "Ranch is outside town." She nodded again. 20 minutes felt long when trust was involved. Still, she stayed. As they drove, he noticed her breathing slow, not fully relaxed but no longer sharp with fear. That small change meant more to him than he expected. They turned onto a dirt road. The truck headlights cut through the darkness, lighting up wooden posts and wide stretches of land. A few horses stood near a fence, their shapes barely visible in the night. The woman watched them closely. "You have horses," she said. "Yeah," he answered. "They keep me busy." A pause, then she said, "They're good animals." He smiled faintly. "They are." The ranch house came into view, lights glowing softly through the windows. It wasn't big, but it was solid, warm, safe. The woman's chest tightened. Safe places were rare for her. She didn't know how long this one would last. He parked near the house and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt heavy. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You remember what I said," she spoke, her voice firm now. "I leave if I want." "I remember," he said. "Door never locked." He stepped out first, letting her take her time. Cold rushed in when she opened her door, but it didn't bite as hard knowing warmth waited nearby. She wrapped the blanket tighter and followed him toward the house. Inside, heat surrounded her instantly. The smell of clean wood and coffee lingered in the air. She stopped just inside the doorway, unsure whether to take another step. "You can leave your shoes there," he said, pointing. "I'll grab you some dry socks." She slipped her shoes off carefully, setting them side by side. Her feet ached as feeling returned. He returned with a pair of thick socks and placed them on a chair without handing them directly to her, giving her space. "Bathrooms down the hall if you want to wash up," he added. "Towels are clean." She nodded, still quiet. Trust didn't come easily, but his actions were steady. No rush, no pressure. He showed her the guest room near the barn entrance. It was small but warm, with a simple bed, clean sheets, and a heater humming softly in the corner. "You can stay here," he said. "I'll be in the main part of the house." She stepped inside, running her hand over the blanket on the bed. Clean, soft, real. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. He nodded and left her alone. When the door closed, she stood there for a long time, listening. The house was quiet. No shouting, no sudden footsteps, no fear creeping up her spine. Slowly, she sat on the edge of the bed. The warmth wrapped around her like something she had forgotten how to accept. She removed the blanket from her shoulders and placed it neatly on the chair. Her hands shook as she changed into the dry socks. Tears burned behind her eyes, surprising her. She hadn't planned to cry. She hated crying. It felt like weakness, but the bed was warm. The room was safe. She lay down carefully, ready to jump up if needed. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Her body, exhausted beyond words, finally gave in. She slept deeper than she had in months. In the kitchen, the cowboy sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. He stared at the wall, thoughts heavy. He wondered if he had done the right thing. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. He wondered how someone could be left outside like that, unnoticed. The night passed quietly. Morning came slowly. Pale light crept through the windows. The woman woke suddenly, heart racing, confused by the warmth. For a second she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The truck, the ranch, the bed. She sat up, listening. Birds chirped outside. No danger, no shouting, just calm. She stood and walked to the window. Snow covered the land, untouched and peaceful. Horses moved slowly in the distance. Something in her chest loosened. When she stepped into the kitchen later, clean and calmer, the cowboy looked up from the stove. "Morning," he said simply. "Morning," she replied. "There's breakfast," he said, pointing. "Eat as much or as little as you want." She hesitated, then sat down. The food smelled warm and real. She ate slowly, like she wasn't sure it would stay. They ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt respectful. After a while, she spoke. "I won't stay long." "That's up to you," he replied. She studied him. "Why did you stop last night?" He thought about it. "Because I saw you," she nodded. That answer mattered more than he knew. Outside, the day continued. Inside, something new had begun, not a rescue, not a promise, but a quiet understanding. And both of them felt it. This was only the beginning. The days that followed moved slowly, like the snow melting under a shy sun. Nothing rushed her, nothing pushed her, and that made all the difference. On the first morning after she woke up at the ranch, the woman stayed close to the guest room. She didn't wander. She didn't touch anything that wasn't clearly offered. Years of living without stability had taught her one rule above all others: do not take up space unless you are invited. The cowboy noticed this right away. He went about his morning chores like usual, feeding the horses, checking the fences, clearing ice where needed. But every so often, his eyes drifted toward the house, making sure she was still there. Not because he feared she would leave, but because he wanted her to know she could. When he came back inside, he found her sitting at the small kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the steam rising from her mug. "You don't have to sit so still," he said gently. "You can relax." She gave a small smile. "I'm trying. It's just been a while," he nodded. He understood that better than words could explain. Later that day, he showed her around the ranch, but only as much as she wanted to see. He didn't turn it into a tour. He didn't speak like a guide. He just walked beside her, pointing things out when she asked. She paused near the horses, watching them with quiet focus. One of them stepped closer, curious. "They sense calm," she said softly, "and pain." He looked at her. "You worked with animals before." "My grandfather did," she replied. "I helped when I was young." There was a pause, heavy but not uncomfortable. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "All the time." That was the first personal thing she shared without being asked. It felt like a door opening just a little. That evening, snow began to fall again, thick and steady. The kind that turned the world quiet. They sat in the living room, each in their own chair, not speaking much. The fire cracked softly. She broke the silence. "I don't usually stay places like this," she said. "I figured," he replied. "People either want something or they get tired of helping." "I don't expect anything," he said calmly, "and I'm not in a hurry." She looked at him, then really looked. His face held no pressure, no hidden meaning, just patience. That night she slept again without fear. But this time when she woke up, she didn't panic. She didn't expect to be chased away. That alone felt like a miracle. Over the next few days, she began to move more freely. She offered to help, first with small things, washing dishes, folding laundry. Each time she asked first. "You don't have to earn your stay," he told her. "I know," she said, "but I want to help." He didn't argue. Helping gave her purpose. Purpose gave her strength. She started spending time outside, bundled up, watching him work. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she just sat nearby, letting the quiet settle around her. The ranch had a different kind of silence, one that didn't feel empty. One afternoon, as they fixed a loose fence together, she spoke again. "I used to have a job," she said. "A long time ago." He waited. "I lost it when my mother passed, then everything else followed." He nodded slowly. "That happens more than people think," she swallowed. "People assume it's one bad choice, but it's not. It's many small losses that pile up." "That sounds right," he said. She exhaled as if relieved to be understood. That evening he asked if she wanted to stay longer. "Only if you want to," he added quickly. She thought about it. "I don't know how long, but I'm not ready to leave yet." "That's okay," he said. "One day at a time." Those words stayed with her. The town began to whisper. Someone had seen her with him. Someone else noticed she wasn't on the street anymore. Questions followed. Not all of them kind. He didn't bring those questions home. When a neighbor hinted at concern, he answered simply, she needed warmth. That was enough for him. For her, the ranch became a place of healing, though she didn't call it that. Healing sounded too big, too hopeful. Instead, she focused on small things: warm meals, steady sleep, honest conversations. One morning she surprised him by cooking breakfast. "I hope it's okay," she said, nervous. He smiled. "It's more than okay." They ate together, laughing softly when the eggs cooked unevenly. It was the first time she laughed freely in a long time. The sound startled her. "I forgot what that felt like," she admitted. He smiled but didn't comment. He didn't want to break the moment. Later that day, she asked him something he didn't expect. "Why do you live so far out?" He leaned against the fence thinking, "Peace and fewer questions," she nodded. "I understand that." That night, as the fire burned low, she shared more of her story, not all at once, just pieces, enough to be real. She spoke of family traditions, of stories told by elders, of strength passed down quietly. She spoke of loss without bitterness, of survival without pride. He listened, truly listened. When she finished, the room felt different, lighter. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded. "So am I." By the end of that week, something had shifted, not into dependence, not into promises, but into trust. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to belong, if only for now. And both of them knew this part of the journey mattered just as much as the night it all began. The change did not happen all at once. It came quietly, like the way frost melts after sunrise. No big moment announced it. No clear line marked before and after. But both of them felt it. By the start of the second week, the woman no longer asked permission for every small thing. She still respected the space, still stayed mindful, but her shoulders were no longer pulled up in defense all the time. She walked through the house without flinching. She spoke without measuring every word. She slept through the night. The cowboy noticed these changes in small details. The way she hummed softly while washing dishes. The way she stood a little straighter when she stepped outside. The way her eyes held more light. One morning she joined him early, before the sun had fully risen. The air was cold but not cruel. She wrapped herself in a thick jacket and followed him toward the barn. "You don't have to come out this early," he said. "I want to," she replied. "I like mornings." He nodded and didn't question it. They worked side by side, not rushing. She handed him tools when he needed them, sometimes before he even asked. Her hands remembered more than she expected. The rhythm of work felt familiar, like something her body had been waiting for. As they took a break, leaning against the fence, she looked out over the land. "My grandmother used to say the land listens," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "Listens to what?" "To how you treat it," she answered, "and how you treat yourself." He thought about that for a moment. "That sounds right," she smiled. Later that day, a truck drove slowly past the ranch, then another. The town had noticed. Curiosity always followed kindness, and not everyone understood it. That evening she seemed quieter than usual. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble for you." "You're not," he said firmly. She looked down. "People talk." "They always do," he replied. "I stopped listening a long time ago." She nodded, but the worry didn't fully leave her face. The next morning he drove into town for supplies and asked if she wanted to come. She paused at the door, hand on her jacket. "I haven't been back like this," she said. "We can turn around any time," he said. After a long moment she nodded. "Okay." The town felt smaller than she remembered. Eyes followed them, some curious, some kind, some not. She kept her head high, but inside old feelings stirred. At the store, a woman behind the counter hesitated before smiling. "Good morning," she said carefully. "Morning," the woman replied, steady and calm. They finished quickly and left. Once back in the truck, she let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not making me feel like I had to explain myself." He nodded. "You don't owe anyone that." That afternoon she sat at the table, writing in a small notebook she had kept tucked away. Words came slowly at first, then more freely. Memories. Thoughts, hopes she hadn't allowed herself to name before. When he passed by, he didn't read over her shoulder. He simply placed a cup of tea beside her. That simple respect meant everything. As days passed, they talked more. Not just about the past, but about ordinary things. Whether work, music, stories that made them laugh. One evening she shared something she had never said out loud to anyone before. "I used to think needing help meant I failed," she said. He looked at her. "I don't see failure." "I do," she admitted. "Or I did." "What do you see now?" She thought for a long time. "I see someone who survived, someone who's still here." He nodded. "That's how I see you too." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. That night she slept deeply without dreams chasing her awake. The next day brought a hard conversation. "I don't want to stay stuck," she said, standing by the window, "as safe as this feels." "I wouldn't want that for you," he said gently. "I want to work again. I want my own place someday." He smiled. "That sounds like a plan." They talked about steps, not pressure, not deadlines, just options, local programs, part-time work, support that respected her choices. He made it clear help was available, but control stayed with her. That mattered more than anything. A few days later, she volunteered to help a neighbor with chores. Word spread, quietly this time, not as gossip, but as respect. People began to see her differently. More importantly, she began to see herself differently. One afternoon, as they watched the sunset, she spoke softly. "That night you stopped, you didn't save me." He looked at her surprised. "You reminded me," she continued, "that I still mattered." He swallowed and nodded. "I'm glad I did." Silence settled between them, warm and honest. Winter was loosening its grip. Snow melted into streams. The land breathed again. And so did she. This part of her journey was not about shelter anymore. It was about strength returning piece by piece. And both of them knew the final step would be the hardest, because moving forward meant letting go. But for the first time in a long while, letting go didn't feel like falling. It felt like choosing to stand. The last days of winter passed quietly, like they knew their time was almost over. The snow no longer fell heavy. The air still held cold, but it was softer now, easier to breathe. Mornings came with pale sunlight instead of gray skies. The land was changing, and so was she. The woman woke early one morning and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the ranch come alive. Horses shifted in the distance. A bird called out, brave enough to believe spring was coming. She wrapped her hands around a warm cup of tea and felt something steady inside her chest. Not fear, not doubt, readiness. When she stepped into the kitchen, the cowboy was already there, tying his boots. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," she replied with a small smile. They shared breakfast like they always did now, comfortable in the silence. There was no rush, but there was something unspoken hanging between them. They both felt it. After the dishes were done, she took a breath. "I had a call yesterday," she said. He looked at her, calm but attentive. "Yeah, there's a job opening in town, part-time at first." "That sounds good," he said, meaning it. "It does," she agreed. Then she added, "There's also a small room available, not fancy, but clean." He nodded slowly. "And how do you feel about that?" She looked out the window, watching light move across the land. "Scared," she admitted, "but ready." He smiled gently. "That's usually how it starts." They stepped outside together. The ground was wet from melting snow, but solid beneath their boots. She walked with more confidence now, no longer afraid of each step. "I don't want you to think I'm leaving because I don't appreciate this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "You're leaving because you do." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "You gave me more than a place to stay." He shook his head. "You did the work, but you opened the door." He didn't argue with that. The next few days were filled with preparation. She gathered her few belongings, folding them neatly. She wrote in her notebook each night, filling pages with thoughts she once kept locked away. She practiced the bus route to town. She met the woman who managed the small room and asked careful questions. The cowboy never hovered, never pushed. He helped when asked and stepped back when not. On her last night at the ranch, they sat outside by a small fire. The sky was clear, filled with stars. "I used to think endings were failures," she said. "Like proof that something went wrong. "And now," he asked, "now I think some endings are just doors closing so others can open." He nodded. "That sounds right." She stared into the fire. "I don't know what happens next." "None of us do," he said. "That's okay." She smiled, warm and real. "I used to be afraid of tomorrow, and now I'm curious." They sat quietly, letting the moment settle. The next morning came too fast and not fast enough. She stood by the door with her bag at her feet. Everything she owned fit inside it, but it felt lighter than it ever had before. He handed her a small envelope. "Just in case," he said. She hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she said. "Not the situation, me." He swallowed and nodded. Outside, the truck waited. This time she climbed in without hesitation. The drive to town felt different now. The same road, but not the same journey. When they reached her new place, she stepped out and looked around. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She turned to him. "Will you be okay out there by yourself?" He smiled. "I was before, I will be again." She hugged him then, briefly but firmly. It wasn't desperate, it wasn't heavy, it was full of gratitude. "Take care of yourself," he said. "I will," she replied. "You do the same." As the truck pulled away, she watched until it disappeared down the road. Then she turned toward her door and stepped forward. Life didn't suddenly become easy. The job was tiring. Some days were hard. Some nights felt lonely. But she had a key now, a routine, a future. She walked with her head higher through town. People noticed. Some smiled. Some didn't. It mattered less than it once did. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the ranch. Simple handwriting, honest words. She wrote about her job, about her room. About mornings that felt steady instead of frightening. She thanked him again, but also wrote this. "I didn't need saving. I needed a chance. Thank you for giving me one." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Outside, the land was green again. The cold was gone. The world moved forward. And somewhere in town, a woman who once froze in the shadows walked into the sunlight, carrying her life with her, step by steady step. Not rescued, not forgotten.